Yo, what's going on? We are back with another episode of the Unsilent Church podcast.
What up,
and
dude?
we have it. What up? My bad. What up, everybody? What up? Listen, we got a really dope topic that we're going to be talking about today.
I mean, everybody's kind of talking about it.
Everybody's talking about it.
We're going to add a couple cents to the conversation.
You know, just to let people know, no, it's not my favorite basketball player of all time. No, it's not Allen Iverson. No, it's not Bubba Chuck. But we are talking about AI. Go ahead, Pastor V. Talk to us.
Well, for a conversation like this, we need
You
the
didn't even
experts.
introduce the guest? Oh, I guess you're going to introduce the guest. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we're excited to have Cara Manzanillo.
Kara.
You did it.
She works in the AI tech space, and so we thought it would be great to sort of have a discussion with you about, for those who don't know what AI is, artificial intelligence. It's ChatGPT, and it's...
Say that one more time.
ChatGPT. I did mess up.
We're so proud of you, Matt.
See, so we got to have Christy go back and, she going to find a time.
I've seen.
Okay, so...
It's the Gemini.
Because you were looking at John really weird when he tried to call you out there. You're like, I never do that. Like, this is what they were talking about.
Most people are encountering AI in those spaces, but it's more than that. And so we thought it would be good to hear from you in terms of just, what should we be thinking about when it comes to artificial intelligence? There's a lot of good things being said, a lot of bad or people worried, concerned. Yeah. I might count myself among those people.
This is going to be a fun conversation,
right, when it comes to artificial intelligence. So obviously that's the big tenet on which we're talking, but it'd be great to hear from you in terms of just how you got involved in this space. You started off in nonprofit.
I did. So I've been in tech for about 10 years and in AI specifically. But before that, I actually got my start in the nonprofit space. And I thought that was what I was going to do long term. It was kind of a twist of fate ending up in technology. But my parents, I grew up overseas. They've worked in nonprofit for my entire life.
Overseas where?
Faith-based. Guatemala, actually, Central America. But they worked in very embedded in the community, faith-based nonprofit work, and they were always very part and engaged in the global and local community. And I think that instilled in me really early the belief that if you see a need and you can help, you can be a part of meeting that need or solving that problem, then you then carry responsibility. And that's a really big statement. But I think we can apply it in big and little ways in our life that there are, and showing up, for the work. And so when I started in nonprofit, I think I experienced really early on what a lot of folks experience in nonprofit. It's a really big job, like anything, whether you're working in church or education or social work. There are big needs and you're solving for big problems. And often we find that these spaces are the most wildly under-resourced. When you think about finances, when you think about people, resources, and then infrastructure, just tooling, right, to support teams. And we see
tooling is a very such a tech word. Tooling. Like, we know where you work.
Well, we got a tech person in the building.
Out of the girl. Sorry, guys. But you see these, and I mean, that's probably a commentary, a whole different conversation about what we value, in these key areas. And
part two, we're going to bring you back, Karen.
Another conversation. But I think within me, it was kind of the catalyst of starting to ask, how do we find solutions with resources that we have that scale? How do we reach more people in more proactive, more sustainable, more holistic, and even systematic ways? And that is definitely not to detract from grassroots work, right? I think if you are boots on the ground, that is important. If you impact one person, 10 people, 100, that is. But no one's ever accused me of being a patient woman. And I think I constantly have this thought process of saying, how can we drive more impact? How can we take these resources and stretch them and solve bigger problems? And that was kind of the catalyst into technology and really seeing technology and ultimately artificial intelligence, where I'm at now, as a multiplier for impact. But I'd say within that conversation, impact, both good and bad.
Yeah. So we want to definitely get into that. But we shouldn't assume everyone understands what we mean by artificial intelligence, what it actually does. I sort of hinted at it in terms of how most people will interact with it on their phones, but it's a lot of things, right? In terms of understanding the complexity of it, how it works. Maybe talk a little bit about sort of just what it is. It's not it's not Harry Potter, right? It's not actually magic. It feels like it sometimes.
You sure?
I mean, yeah. I think
can sort of feel that way.
Though, I think it's very fair that there's a lot of confusion around it because AI, artificial intelligence, has become an umbrella term that includes generative AI like chatbots or agentic AI like reasoning, or even robotics and world building simulation and self-driving cars all kind of fit under that umbrella.
They've been saying AI for years now. So like machine learning is another term that you'll hear. You've heard a lot of things in your phone. It's like AI's doing this, deep research, machine learning. Like it's been in your phone for a while. They've been using the language, but it hasn't been.
Grammarly has AI in it too, right?
Well, yeah. Again,
there's a lot of random acts of AI happening right now. It's a real buzzword. But if we kind of like drill down, right, to like a non-technical, for the technical folks, this is not for you. But like for I think a lot of people, because it's complex. It is complex. I think people can kind of think of it as magic or sci-fi or just, I don't know what this is. But really, like at a core level, it is a tool, a very powerful tool, and systems that are built of, hardware and networking and software, lots of components. But it's a tool built by humans, trained on primarily human data, that contains human assumptions and biases and value systems embedded within that. And so when you kind of break that down, AI is trained on billions of data sets, right? So you think scrape the whole web.
Wow. So
every textbook,
it's able to read everything on the internet.
Everything. We've consumed pretty much all the data of the world. So you think textbook, psychology, songs, poems, like all of it. Movies.
Well, that's an interesting thing about it's interesting.
I want to hear what she's going to. Let me finish her sentence. I want to hear what she's going to say.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean,
James got a lot of thoughts.
But no, I want to finish her definition.
No, it's a good conversation. I think when you think about all this data, right, is really then trained to recognize patterns and say when this connects to this. And then on the end, on the inference side, kind of like when you fine tune it on that end, you're then training it to assist humans with completing certain tasks, innovation, and ultimately, solve really big problems. To James's point, like it's a lot of data, and so you think about the smartest person, all the smartest people in the world throughout history, all their knowledge is combined into one head, and it's flowing in and out all the time. When you think about that, that's a crazy idea, but it also opens up the door for how do we solve really big problems with all of this knowledge and tackle these challenges.
It's not necessarily the case when you think about the data that AI consumes, that they're actually consuming all the data of the world. What they're consuming is all the data that has been published in the world.
Okay, yeah.
Sure. See that? So it's like parsing. You got to understand when
that's on the internet.
The data that they've been given is data that has been published. Okay. And so so when you think about the limitations of AI and what it's actually capable of doing, it can't create new things in that way, right? In the same way that the brains, like our brain works. Like what they're trying to replicate is the neural activity that happens in our brain, right? So another term that you'll hear in these conversations, if you follow them, is neural networks, right? That sounds like neurology. It sounds like, neuropathy when you think about like clinical psychology and things of that sort. What they're trying to do is replicate what happens in the brain. One of the limitations that I think they don't quite see, and they're trying to do this with robotics, like intelligence isn't just in the head, even though a lot of things happen up there. But if you think about spatial intelligence and what the body is actually capable of doing and how it sends signals up and down, like people talk about your gut being a second brain, there are still some ways in which AI has consumed everything that's on the web, right? Everything that humans have published that's available on the web through the history of time. Now, there are some things in the history of time that hasn't been published to the internet that we cannot find, right? That are in places that aren't necessarily accessible. And I do think it does go into the sense of like the things that AI has been trained on sometimes omits the things that are pertinent to the stories of certain kinds of people. And then so you get bias in that sense just because the things that they feel important that are the best data don't always include the people that it should.
Yeah,
right?
and
It doesn't always
mostly
include
fine-tuning on the end, right?
right.
So the way you tune, you can build something. The more data you have, so the more robust models are the ones that have the most data.
Yeah.
Because you have a lot more bias, or if you only have A, B, and C, then you're going to pick one of A, B, and C as the answer. The more you have to pull from, the more robust, the better it gets. And then on the end, you're fine-tuning it, right? You're really saying this is the actual task. These are billions of
Right.
parameters that we're putting into it, and this is what we specifically want it to accomplish. And so that's where the customization comes in and can vary
So
widely too.
it's like manuscripts with the Bible, in a sense. Instead of having just like one manuscript that we have to be able to, having a bunch of manuscripts and being able to try to get the best interpretation of whatever.
The challenge sometimes is, depending on what you're looking for, right? You can have all the manuscripts in the world. Now, the human brain, like, if you had all the manuscripts of the world, how long would it take you to read that?
Long time.
That's sometimes the challenge that they're trying to accomplish, is like, if we could have something that knew all of the data that's out there, then it would make it that much easier to process and get some of the answers and solutions and solve some of the problems that we're trying to do. That's the very positive end of it. I think that is happening.
Let's explore that a little bit. I mean, so AI, because its ability to pull in all this data and see patterns and connections, can solve very complex problems.
Yeah.
Like, what are some of the things, some of the more positive things that you think are, I mean, like you said in your story, like you want to say, how can we use technology to accomplish good at scale?
At scale, yeah.
What are some of the things that I think AI is doing or could really do in the very near future?
Yeah, so the term that's kind of been coined is AI for good, and that's how do we solve big human problems using AI. And so some of the use cases, right, that are really mind-blowing right now, if you look at scientific discovery and research, right? Last year, the Nobel Prize, 2 were won by scientists using AI. That was a first. And they, one piece of that was that they unlocked proteins in the body that we have been, trying to work on for a very long time. And it was to the tune of, I think, 200 million proteins that they were able to unlock in 1 year. Generally, just one takes years and years and years to work on. And that work, then can be carried into research on cancer.
Yeah, help accomplish that.
Yeah, and accomplish that. And so one of the researchers on that said that he truly believes if we keep investing in this, within 10 years, it's plausible that we could cure all of the primary diseases. And so when you think about that impact, that's huge. It's a big statement, but on a human level, how does that, impact people and quality of life? And then, you kind of take that into like the healthcare space, and you're going to see like drug discovery is being expedited. So generally one drug takes about 10 years to create and millions of dollars of investment. That doesn't scale when you have like a pandemic or a plague or overseas, you have things that, how do you do that? And so this is able to, we're working on being able to do it in months instead and cut the cost in half, which scales it, but also within our healthcare system, we talk about structures that we want to see everyone have, but a lot of those structures are pretty broken, right? We're seeing in education and healthcare high burnout, and so I think there's also a conversation on how do we use it to assist and strengthen those too. So when in healthcare, it's also preventative. It can, at a cellular, like at a body level, it can detect things early and prevent them in addition to curing, but it also can assist, our healthcare through taking offboarding tasks like reporting and taking notes or assisting a doctor who's had a long shift and saying, you missed this piece, include this, or there's this history, or there's this note to take, whether it's in surgery or whether it's in prescribing medications.
And that applies to other fields too, like legal fields, right?
That applies everywhere. Like you think of legal fields and having really democratizing, having a lawyer, having, it can go across a lot of things, including education. That's a big one. That one's really interesting. And I think often when I'm having these conversations, that comes up a lot, especially within parents. It's top of mind. Early childhood development's a very important conversation, education. But I also think like it's important to kind of take a step back and say, how's our education system doing right now? And what is the purpose of it? And stats are showing in education that about 50% of kids are reporting as feeling disengaged and not connected to school. Over 50% of teachers are saying we feel burnt out. And it's showing up in the results. We're sliding in the global scale of developed countries in our scoring, specifically in science and math and some of those really core topics. And so I think it's interesting to look at it and say, how can we support teachers, not educate children with AI, but assist the system, with, think about like grading, lesson plans, tutoring, really having tutors that can
personalize,
scale, but I think it's also a conversation of saying, how does AI make us more human? And help us be better in all of these things. So we don't want to educate people with AI. We want AI to push us, as a facilitator to re-engage kids maybe with disabilities, or, just have different learning paths that we can personalize. So I think there's a lot of different angles, and even just thinking in our everyday work, I think there's a lot of work that we do that is pretty soul draining, and saying, how can we offboard these things and focus on more important human things like connection and purposeful work.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's just so many different applications, right?
Many.
She's very optimistic.
It can better predict weather, self-driving cars. You can sort of just, you can almost think of any field of work.
Yeah.
Or you're right, things that are routine that AI could solve, but then also it can iterate on, right? And so you're right. So its ability to recognize patterns and see things based on the data sets we're giving it, help push us in some directions, which all sounds great, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I noticed in what you said, we'll pick one example. We won't go too far into this, but you didn't mention, AI can help your kids write their college essays, right? Yeah. Or you didn't mention like AI can be your boyfriend or your girlfriend, right? Which, I mean, I'm getting this, what I'm saying is that there are some challenges here, because I think some of the worries and concerns people have are that sounds all good, but AI is being used in the things I just listed.
Yeah.
And I would argue maybe that's somewhat dehumanizing if AI is becoming your therapist. You're getting all your therapy from, I think it can be helpful in some ways, but when people sort of, offload everything onto AI in those ways, and some of the things I listed, just writing essays for you.
AI should be assisting us, not, I
substituting,
replacing.
Okay, that's
so, and I think like, especially in higher ed, right? Like we're like essays. What is the purpose of essays? I think at the end of the day, like, is education to get a good job? Is it to be like, is it social? Is it
make money?
Thinking to make money? But like our economics says, we're educating people for the workforce, and so that's an interesting, conversation in and of itself. Mm-hmm. But I do think, and we can reformulate. When a calculator, was invented, that completely changed math. And a lot of people thought it was cheating. But if you think about it, it enabled us, we rebuilt curriculum around math, and it's enabled us to make a lot of scientific discoveries, space, lots of things have happened because we were able to up our math. Yeah. And so I think there are ways, I heard an example the other day that I thought was really interesting, that they were like, in college, we should probably just assume that students have this tool to write essays and they're going to use it.
Should change what you're asking.
Like have them write an essay with it, have them like talk about their prompts, how they used it, and then have them come back in a group setting and analyze it and say, what was wrong, what was right, what should I have added here, what context is missing, and kind of pushing that social and critical thinking muscle. I think we have to think about these things and not just be blindly optimistic.
Okay, so I mean, in that use scenario, this is where I do have some problems with that, in the sense of that, like, I mean, that's sort of a way of saying, how can we better use AI and see what it does well? But I do think there is something valuable and that involves us as humans when I'm sitting in front of something and I'm like, okay, what do I write, right? And I have to sort of generate something, right? And I have to initiate sort of putting something on paper, et cetera. That sort of process, that
creativity.
And so that's I mean, we haven't figured this out yet. And so I want to be positive. I think I'm generally positive AI, but I know human nature. And so I wonder in terms of, and I think AI, you're right, all these different, having cars now, having calculators, all these things are extremely helpful that, took some things away, right? Our ability to do math in our head, but it's brought more. AI feels seismic.
It's much more on a bigger scale, for sure.
And in human history, right? And that I don't want to be, I don't want to exaggerate, but I don't think I'm exaggerating to say that. I think there's nothing more almost human defining or more that will affect us more, I think, than AI. And so I do have concerns in the sense of the ability, the ways in which maybe we're losing or sort of downplaying the process that is part of having to work hard to do something.
The struggle.
And
what that develops, especially in early childhood development. Because you think about us, we've already, gone through a lot of and kind of struggled through these. So we're using AI very differently than maybe the younger generation will use it, who kind of is bypassing those steps.
Yes.
And so I think that's an important part of the conversation is like, at what age is AI appropriate? Are there certain types of AIs that should be built that are specific for children? And how should they be embedded in other activities that encourage, critical thinking and like that container to struggle within, while also preparing kids for a future? Because I do think the more healthy we are, your kids outside, if they're reading, if they're socially well adjusted, I think that they're going to be better prepared for whatever comes at us. And we don't fully know what to prepare for right now with AI because it's big, right? We don't know what we're educating them fully for the future. And so I think the healthier our kids are and the more adaptable and the more curious and innovative they are, the better prepared they're going to be for whatever the future outcome is.
I do think there's a degree where people have to understand what humans are. Like, I think you do bring this back to the Imago Dei, people being made in the image of God and what that actually means. I do think weekly, we don't say enough, remember who you are. I watch a podcast very often, and the biggest concern, and again, these are people who are funding all of these AI projects, like Link Ventures, funding things at MIT and Harvard. You've got, again, like every major, like, I don't know if you remember Stable Diffusion, which was one of the image generators in the beginning when DALL-E came out, when chat was first like a thing. But the thing that always comes back down to, and when it comes to the concern of things, is like when you get to this age of abundance, which is another phrase that you'll hear a lot, is purpose, right? Like what does it mean to be human? Like what are humans here for, right? And I remember, like, you probably remember, like, Jonathan Edwards, the means for which God, the end of the means for which God created the world. Like, you remember that paper that he wrote a while back, which just
I actually do not remember that paper.
I'm not saying I'm a fan of Jonathan Edwards, but the idea of saying why did God create humans, right? Why were we created to begin with, right? Mm-hmm. Why do humans exist? What is the purpose of humanity? I think when you like getting a hold of that question, AI then becomes something completely different. And I do think it becomes a tool that you can use to try to accomplish a specific mission. Like, what am I actually trying to do? Like, you talked about writing an essay. What does an essay do? Like, part of it is, can I think through a problem and come up with new and inventive ways to solve it, right? If at 3 years old, I'm putting a screen or some sort of device in front of a child to say, oh, just ask it whatever you want, it's going to give you the answer, then you don't develop, call it the neural pathways. Exactly. Yeah. And so you don't actually build those things out. But if I'm trying to solve a problem, and I can't unblank the page, like what Ramon is talking about. And I'm like, okay, I can have a conversation. I do this in my car all the time. I'm just commuting to work. I got 40 minutes in the car. And I'm like, I need to think through something. I don't quite know how I want to, like, hey, let me just have a conversation and just ramble. And then it does an incredible job of saying, here's what you said, or here's what I heard, right? And then I can hear something, speak back to me what I just said to it, to help me sort of clarify my thoughts and go, oh, and then I can use that to further kind of refine my thinking. You talk about refinement.
As an AI therapist.
No, it's not. Not therapy. Not therapy.
You could do that same practice that you just said. You could do that with writing. You like in one sense, you're talking about. They call it writing yourself clear, and so
sure.
You're just talking yourself clear.
Because I'm driving, right? So I can't write while I drive.
But you're saying the AI is a good partner in that.
It's a good tool to help
when you need a sparring partner to be like, okay, I need to just work out some thoughts because I'm trying to solve a problem, but I don't know how I want to like write it out on a website.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's a good point, I think, on human value. Like what does it mean to be human is such a big part of this, because for years, I think we've actually almost built a system and a workforce and a lifestyle that rewards people for acting like machines almost, right? Your
Precisely.
value is based on your output, your productivity, and we've kind of infiltrated that. And now we're building these machines that are supposed to replicate
humans, exactly.
And, even emotions and thoughts.
They're trying.
And things. And so I think that's a very interesting conversation to go back and say, like, do we actually know what it means to be human and what our true value
exactly.
is? Because, that's a part of the conversation of how we use AI. Because if AI just gives us more time to offboard things that we don't want to do, but we're not replacing them with things that drive real, true value and purpose, then it wasn't, actually a helpful.
You have no real vision. If it's just like, oh, this just takes away work that I don't want to do. It's like, well, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Like I remember, who was the pastor Tampa? I can't remember his name. Darrell Williamson.
Pastor Darrell.
I remember one of the questions that he asked, and we were talking about a specific passage. I can't remember. But at the judgment seat, the question's going to be, what did you do? That will be a real question. And I think if you think about AI and all we're thinking about is like all the stuff we don't want to do, I think that's fine. There's a degree to which it's like, hey, some of the work is great if I can automate it so that I can spend my time doing the thing that I really should be doing. But I think the question that we have to have is one, I think it's going to come up a lot anyways, like, what does it mean to be human? Because as you have nation states, Albania has done this, giving people citizenship. I think Saudi Arabia has already done that. Albania has already named an AI as part of its like administrative cabinet or leadership. Like these are real things that are happening already. As that happens and AI is getting citizenship, again, you're going to say, well, what does it mean to be a citizen? What does it mean to be human? But I think you have to go like, okay, what are we here for? What are we supposed to be doing? What kinds of problems are we supposed to be solving? And then I think you might see a fork in that sense where some people will see it one way, some people will see it another. I will reference Francis Schaeffer in the book, How Should We Then Live? I don't know the wording of it, but he talks about the same thing where it's like people see the world as just one big mechanism, right? And we just become cogs in a machine. And if God isn't at the center point, then again, man becomes machine essentially. Yeah. And that becomes something we have to have a conversation about as, again, companies are trying to build machines, they always say, and I go, is that really what you're trying to build? Or are you trying to bring people together to operate more like a body? And I think the church has a lot of wisdom to help them solve those.
I think when we live lives that, of real purpose and value, that has impact, that alignment, right? When we're creating, we're innovating, we have a purpose and a purpose beyond just ourselves, right? Like that's a blueprint that we see in the Bible and how we live our life. And so I think there is a decision in this. I think that I have a lot of optimism for the impact that we can have here. I think it is huge and it has real tangible impact, but a lot of it has to do with a realignment of like, us, what do we value? Do I take that extra time? If I now only have a 3-day work week, am I spending time with family? Am I creating? Am I engaging in my community? Am I touching grass, being out in nature, right? Like, am I doing things that really make us healthy and recharge us, or are we just using it to optimize our time to do even more things, And so I think a lot of this kind of does come back to the question is like, what does it mean to be human, but also what is human value? What brings us meaning? What brings us purpose? And what like helps us have, abundance is the term, flourishing, there's a lot, that's being brought up. But I do think all of these things are really important conversations to have, not from like fear or from like blind optimism, but saying this has great potential and we get to be a part of shaping what it becomes. Yeah.
I just want to say, man, y'all got to chill with them AI boyfriends and AI girlfriends. that is diabolical. Like, I don't know like what y'all into, but we got to chill. That's not part of the good of AI. Right.
But here's the thing.
We should be careful of anything that, like, I think I'm still as optimistic as I am about solving big problems. I also think like the ones that replace humans, I'm much more leery of. So if you think about like even a therapist, I'll pass for now. It might be like a good down the road. Like you think, if someone doesn't have access or financial resources and, you have it trained specifically for that. But I don't think the AIs are trained specifically right now for children or for therapy. True. And it's not really like, it doesn't have a soul. It doesn't have actual feelings and intuition. It's connecting patterns based off of a lot of data. So it could get it right and it could get it wrong. And so when you're trying to replace presence, deep connection, relationship, these core things that I think we're built for with a machine, no matter how good it is at imitating us, it's not going to land. And so I think I'm a lot more, I definitely think of it as like, how can it help us be more human and solve big human problems, not replace humans? And I think that's like a line, we have to think of.
People are getting AI pastors, I heard too. They don't want to go to a church. I want to get an AI pastor.
Yeah, I think you're always going to have, unfortunately, sort of two sides of use or two kinds of use. Again, some people will argue that the reason why AI, and even to the degree AI in physical form and robotics, is there are problems that don't have enough human capital to even address. And so when things need to be built, one of the things I think about a lot, my family is from Nigeria originally. Nigeria still today, 2025, does not have reliable power, right? So these things are like very real to me. And I go, oh, I understand when people say there are problems in the world that need to happen. If we can stop automating something over here, if I can automate something over here so I can spend thought time to do something over there, that could be, you could see value in that to say, oh, let's get reliable power. Let's build this. Oh, we don't have enough people. We don't have enough man hours. We don't have enough skilled labor. Apple had this conversation when he was like, why do you manufacture in China? It was a big conversation. Why don't you just move it here? It's like, well, it isn't simply, and it isn't actually the case that the labor is cheaper. It's like in China, because there are over 1 billion people in that population, the skills that they have for very fine, sophisticated tooling to actually assemble these things is, you can find a stadium of people who have that degree of sophisticated expertise. And so it's like, hey, there are just certain things that you can accomplish in certain places of the world that you can't in other parts, simply because of the sheer volume of people that are there. Well, when you try to go into a new place that isn't as developed, and you're saying, hey, can we move this forward? Can we make power more reliable? Can we fix some of the pipelines? Can we fix the water issues? Can we fix some of these other things? You go, man, there aren't enough people, and then all the things you have to get through in order to make that happen.
Yeah.
That's when they say, oh, the argument is, oh, robotics can do that.
But there are really interesting use cases, because I think where we care about a problem, we can solve it. And there's innovation, right? So like even now I'm looking at companies that I met with a couple of weeks ago where they were like, oh, there's an energy crisis that we're actually causing because to train these and do the inference
water
requires
and power,
a lot. So they were like, oh, there are oil drills that are being drilled, and there's natural gases that just get burned into the environment, not healthy. And they've now found a way to go capture those natural gases and turn it into
like
electricity.
Recycle it,
And when we talk about underdeveloped, I worked in education before. A nonprofit. And so that was an interesting, is not everyone has access, not everyone has resources. It goes back to that conversation and saying, how can AI not replace the human elements, but add resources and stretch resources and solve problems
where they currently aren't, where there's like a vacuum or a hole,
and help us kind of think through everything, right? It's weather, it's, prediction, it's that causes, you think other countries where there's food insecurity, there are so many big problems that if we have the will and the interest and the incentive to tackle this can help us do that, but it's always, I think, in balance. And
I think the ethic that helps drive us in that direction is an ethic that says humanity is good, we want to encourage human flourishing, etc. And that's sort of and I think a good Christian worldview has that. And I think where we can go wrong is when we sort of lose that sense of what it means to be human, right? And so in many ways, really understanding what that is will help us hopefully land in the right direction on this.
Yes. And I think the church has a great opportunity, like Kara was saying, to shape some of those things. Because even as much as like people will say robotics and AI will help solve these massive, massive problems and create this age of abundance, at the same time, like running in parallel, there are going to be bad actors trying to do just as heinous things with that same AI. And as much as the church can influence, because we're in these spaces, like Carrie, you work in the tech space, like some of us work in software companies, like pastors just have relationships with these people who have computer science degrees. Like we're all out there. We're like Christians are in all of these spaces. And the thing that I'm always praying and hoping would happen is that these conversations help influence the way the data gets shaped, or, how policies get formed, or, the data that's collected, so that it actually does sort of see all people and not just some people. Like I hear conversations around AI, and I say this because they'll talk about the US, China, and Europe, and then just stop the conversation. I'm like, there's a really big continent right in the center right there, right? And it doesn't even get mentioned, right? I was watching a podcast with will.i.am and Van Jones, and I don't think the African continent even had GPUs on the continent. The entire continent. GPUs are the processors that fuel AI data centers.
The
So when-
machines underneath it.
So when they're doing all that processing, it's because there are
Thanks
these
for helping
big
me out on
boxes
that. I
with
appreciate it.
with like the same processors, not the same
for
processors,
video
but
games, John.
again, when you think about your computer, there's a processor in it. These AIs have big buildings that are filled with racks and racks and racks of these processors in order for all that processing to get done. There weren't any of them on the African continent.
You know, a part of that conversation, though, is that we have been in the training age, training models, which is
Very expensive.
only certain, and that's why you see the Googles, the Metas, that like certain ones that are very heavily resourced are building out. But we're moving into the age of inference, which is the user side of it, right? Like we've trained it, it's been trained. Now, how do we use it more broadly? And I think that'll keep bringing the cost down, which I think we'll be able to scale it more places to solve more problems. And I think like the Christian, like what you're saying is like we believe, like our faith, and as the church, we believe that our value is, you know, inherent. It is not.
Yes.
It is not based off of what we produce, what we do. And I think like that view of like, what is the blueprint that we care for? When it's not productivity, it's not just, you know, if you produce high, then we care about you. You know, if you're
Yes.
contributing in a certain way, it's all people. And so I think that shapes the way we approach all things, and definitely the way we should be approaching and thinking about technology in these conversations and who they impact and where we impact.
Yes, absolutely. The only thought that I was mentioning there was what I appreciated about will.i.am bringing that up was when you think about the way value is created in some cases, like so that people can create consistent power and some of those other things, is that trying to bring that to the place so that some of these countries that often find themselves in these sort of holes in need of aid and having to take loans and things of that sort, to say, oh, what if we gave you the capacity to then create some of the things so that you can create the trade that then starts to affect your community where you are, versus like having to create exports and some of these other things where it's like, oh, there are only a few owners in a few different places. It's like, oh, well, if you spread that out, now there are owners everywhere and everybody just gets
As
to
we're,
share.
like, open sourcing it,
You see what I'm saying?
right?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that should be a big premise is a lot of people, as you develop things like, are you opening it up, especially when it comes
Exactly.
to medical research and scientific research, so that we can scale it to other places that have the need but can't per se fund it, right? Or
Exactly.
commercialize it. And so I think building it in an open environment.
But that's a generous way of thinking about it. It's like, oh, if Christians in these spaces think in that sense, it's like, oh, generosity can be, let me give you the capacity to build this yourself so that you can create revenues for yourself, and then everybody's trading and sharing together. You know what I mean? And I think those are the kinds of things that I'm like, oh, let me sort of push a Christian in this space to say, hey, what if we did this also? So that while, again, companies are becoming $1 trillion companies, I think we have 4 or 5 of them now, right? $1 trillion companies who are making all this money because of what's happening in AI. And then what happens to the distribution of all of that, right? It goes to a few places because of the ownership structures. But again, if you create ways that some of these other countries that historically have been underrepresented, underfunded, under-resourced, and now have these unstable sort of situations, it's like, oh, what if we gave them something like this to build of their own? Now we all share, and it sort of is a rising tide that lifts our boats.
And ethics come into that conversation, because no matter where you are, people use things for good and bad. And so I think that's where the ethical conversations of like how we build it here, how abroad it is built, how we open it up, you know, are all conversations that I think we need to be thinking through, because, you know, so many things that have scaled, this is scaling much faster than we can build guardrails around it.
When we say scale, it means like growing fast, like growing in
fast.
multiples. It's multiplying really quickly.
Yeah. Man, this has been a great conversation. Kara, we definitely gonna bring you back.
Part 2.
We're gonna definitely do a part 2, maybe even a part 3, maybe even a part 4.
This was a fun conversation.
AI ain't going nowhere, and so we got to be able to learn how to kind of engage in all of this. And so, what I want to say before we kind of close our time here is, of course, if you are a supporter of the podcast in any type of way, we want you to like, share, and comment, so that people can be able to hear about this great conversation. And stay away from the AI boyfriends. the AI girlfriends, the AI spouses, the AI side chicks.
Hey, feel free in the comments
AI. Just stay. You don't want to get away from. Get away from.
John
all
taking
that,
it weird
Yeah.
places.
No AI girlfriend, no boyfriend, but do leave your comments. Do leave your comments about your experience with AI. Again, we're talking about all our
we wanna
experiences
hear
with
your
AI.
experiences for sure.
We do want to hear about yours too. So like, get in the comments and be like, how are you using AI and what are you doing with it?
Yeah.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on it too.
Definitely, man. Like we always say, love God, love people. We are out.